The WNBA just posted a video that could end 2 careers, trigger an FBI investigation, and get the commissioner fired, and somehow nobody at the league noticed until it was too late. Welcome back to WNBA Analysis, the channel that breaks down the stories the mainstream sports media is too scared to touch. If you think you've seen every WNBA controversy this season, wait until you hear this one. Because what I'm about to show you isn't a rumor, it isn't a leaked DM, and it isn't some anonymous source. It's an official WNBA video filmed by league cameras, edited by league staff, approved by league management, and posted on the league's own social media account. And it shows 2 of the league's biggest stars doing something that has gotten players in other leagues banned for life. Stick with me for the next few minutes because by the end of this video you're going to understand exactly why this might be the most damaging self-inflicted wound in WNBA history. Before we get into it, I need you to understand something. Channels like this one, channels that actually dig into the real story instead of just repeating a headline, only survive because of people like you. Every single subscriber tells YouTube, this channel matters, keep showing people this content. So if you've ever appreciated getting the full story instead of a 30-second clip with no context, this is the moment to hit that subscribe button. It genuinely means everything to this channel, it costs you nothing, and it's the difference between this kind of honest analysis surviving or disappearing. So if you're new here, welcome to the family. Hit subscribe, tap that bell, and let's get into what actually happened. At WNBA All-Star Weekend, cameras caught something that should never have made it past a single editor, let alone an entire content approval chain. Angel Reese and Paige Bueckers were filmed agreeing to a $400 wager on which of their teams would win an upcoming head-to-head matchup. The clip is casual. It's playful. The 2 players joke about payment methods, about Apple Pay, about who's going to owe who money. And then, somehow, that footage didn't stay in a private group chat or a blooper reel that never sees daylight. It was posted, officially, publicly, on the WNBA's own social media account. Then once someone finally realized what they'd done, it was quietly deleted. But here's the problem. The internet doesn't forget, and neither do federal regulators. Let's slow down and really look at what's in that footage because the casual tone is exactly what makes this so alarming. Reese and Bueckers aren't hiding what they're doing. They're not whispering. They're openly negotiating a bet on a game they are both about to play in. Reese even brings it up again after the fact, casually mentioning that she'll be collecting her winnings. This isn't a rumor pieced together from anonymous sources. It's 2 athletes, on camera, agreeing to gamble on their own competition with league cameras rolling the entire time. Think about the chain of people who had to see this footage and approve it before it went live. A camera operator filmed it. An editor cut it into a shareable clip. A social media manager scheduled the post. Someone with sign-off authority looked at it and said, "Yes, this represents our league well." Every single person in that chain either didn't understand basic sports gambling policy, or understood it and didn't care. Neither explanation is good. Why this isn't a small thing. For casual fans, $400 might sound like nothing, especially for athletes earning endorsement money in the millions. And on the surface, that's true. The dollar amount is basically irrelevant to players at this level. But that's exactly the point sports leagues have spent a century trying to hammer into everyone's heads. The rule was never about the money. It's about the principle that once a player has a financial stake, any financial stake, in the outcome of a game they're competing in, the public can no longer be completely certain that what they're watching is genuine competition. This is why the 1919 Black Sox scandal still gets taught in sports history classes over 100 years later. Members of the Chicago White Sox were paid to intentionally lose World Series games, and it nearly destroyed public trust in professional baseball permanently. It took baseball decades to rebuild that credibility. Since then, every major professional league has treated player gambling as close to an unforgivable sin, not because of the money involved but because of what it does to public confidence. That's why Pete Rose, one of the most statistically dominant hitters the sport has ever produced, has remained banned from Major League Baseball for over 3 decades for betting on games, including games he personally managed. That's why NFL wide receiver Calvin Ridley was suspended for an entire season in 2022, despite the fact that he wasn't betting on his own team, wasn't even actively playing at the time, and was placing those bets from a completely different state while on personal leave. The NFL didn't care that the circumstances were sympathetic. The rule is absolute. No player gambling on the league's games under any circumstances, full stop. The NBA has enforced the same standard. In 2024, a player was permanently banned from the league over gambling-related violations, sending a clear signal that no amount of star power protects you from this rule. And now the WNBA, the same league that governs itself under nearly identical gambling policies, filmed two of its most recognizable young stars doing exactly what those other leagues have destroyed careers over, and then actively promoted the footage as feel-good content. The worst possible timing. Here's what makes this especially painful for the league. This happened during what should have been the WNBA's best season ever. Rookie sensation Caitlin Clark had already driven record-breaking television ratings. The league had just locked in a new media rights deal worth dramatically more than its previous contract. For the first time in decades, major corporate sponsors were paying real attention, and the WNBA finally looked like it was stepping fully out of the NBA's shadow. Sports media figures who cover gambling policy closely didn't hold back once the clip started circulating. Several called it one of the most reckless self-inflicted PR disasters in modern sports league history, not because the players necessarily meant any harm, but because the league itself chose to document, edit, and publish evidence of a policy violation on its own platform with its own branding attached. The WNBA's gambling policy mirrors the NBA's almost word for word. Players cannot bet on any WNBA game, period. There's no carve-out for friendly wagers. There's no minimum dollar threshold that makes a small bet acceptable. There's no exception for bets between friends and teammates instead of strangers. The rule exists specifically to protect the integrity of competition, full stop, and the league itself filmed two of its own stars breaking it. An impossible position for leadership. Now think about the position this puts WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert in. She has spent the better part of a year trying to convince networks, sponsors, and potential expansion owners that the WNBA is a serious, professionally run league worth serious investment. And now her own social media team has manufactured a gambling controversy that forces her into a lose-lose decision. If she enforces the league's own gambling policy and suspends both players, the league loses two of its most marketable, most talked about stars right as the league's popularity is peaking. And she'll face backlash from fans who see the whole thing as a harmless joke blown out of proportion. If she doesn't enforce the policy, she's effectively telling every player, every sponsor, and every regulator that WNBA gambling rules are optional, which is arguably far more dangerous long-term, because it opens the door to far more serious violations down the road. And she has to make this call knowing that NBA Commissioner Adam Silver, and the entire NBA ownership structure the WNBA operates under, is watching closely. Because a gambling controversy in the WNBA doesn't just reflect on the WNBA, it reflects on the NBA's overall governance of women's basketball. The league's options, and why none of them are good. So what actually happens from here? Realistically, the league has a handful of options and none of them are clean. They could argue this was obviously a joke and no real money ever changed hands, which might genuinely be true, but doesn't actually matter under the league's own written policy. The rule prohibits agreeing to a wager on a game you're competing in. It doesn't require that money physically change hands for a violation to have occurred. The agreement itself is the violation. They could argue that $400 is too small an amount to be considered real gambling, but that argument doesn't hold up either. Federal gambling statutes don't include minimum dollar thresholds, and the league's own policy doesn't distinguish between bet sizes. A violation is a violation regardless of the number attached to it. They could hand out a token, symbolic punishment, maybe a 1 or 2 game suspension for each player, just enough to say publicly that they took action without meaningfully affecting either player's season. But that approach sends its own message, that gambling violations are minor inconveniences rather than the existential threat to competitive integrity every other major league treats them as. It would also invite fair criticism that the league is going easy on its violations specifically because it can't afford to bench its most marketable stars. Or, and this appears to be the path they've chosen so far, they could simply delete the video, say nothing publicly, and hope the story quietly fades from the news cycle. The problem with that strategy is that sports gambling isn't just a league policy issue, it's a federal one. The FBI has jurisdiction over gambling-related violations in professional sports. Silence doesn't make a federal violation disappear. It just delays the moment someone official decides to ask questions. What the smart response would have looked like. The smarter move, the move every other major league has made when caught in a similar situation, would have been immediate transparency. Acknowledge publicly that the video violated league policy. Announce fines for both players along with mandatory additional education on gambling rules. Clarify that no money actually changed hands and frame it as a lapse in judgment rather than intentional corruption. Take a short, sharp PR hit, and move forward with credibility intact. Instead, the league deleted the footage and went quiet, A strategy that, ironically, tends to make a story look bigger, not smaller, because it signals the league itself understood exactly how bad this looked. Why the comparisons to other leagues are so damning. Look at how other major professional leagues have handled almost identical situations. When Major League Baseball discovered Pete Rose had bet on games while managing the Cincinnati Reds, they issued a lifetime ban and have held that line for over 35 years, regardless of his statistical legacy. When the NBA uncovered the Tim Donaghy referee betting scandal, they fully cooperated with federal investigators and overhauled their internal integrity systems as a result. When the NFL learned Calvin Ridley had placed bets, even under sympathetic circumstances, they suspended him for a full season without hesitation. Every one of those leagues understood the same underlying principle. Gambling integrity isn't a PR issue, it's an existential one. You protect it at all costs, even when it means losing star power. The WNBA, by contrast, filmed the violation, published it as promotional content, and then tried to quietly erase the evidence once the backlash started. The real question nobody at the league seems to have asked. So here's the question that actually matters. Was any of this worth it? Was a cute, viral clip of two young stars joking around worth manufacturing a gambling controversy? Was the engagement worth the risk of triggering a federal inquiry? Was it worth undermining a season that was otherwise shaping up to be the best in league history? Based on the reaction across sports media, analysts, and fans alike, the answer is clearly no. The WNBA has spent decades fighting to be taken seriously as a major professional league. This single video, created, approved, and published entirely by the league's own staff, undercuts a meaningful chunk of that hard-won credibility in one afternoon. It makes the league's internal processes look amateurish. It makes leadership look unprepared for the scrutiny that comes with mainstream attention. And it hands critics a genuine, well-documented example to point to whenever they argue the WNBA isn't operating at the same professional standard as other major leagues. If you're Cathy Engelbert, you're asking how an organization under this much media scrutiny let this slip through every layer of review. If you're Adam Silver, you're quietly re-evaluating how much oversight the WNBA's day-to-day operations actually need. If you're a player in the league, you're wondering what other rules might not be seriously enforced. And if you're a fan, you're left with an uncomfortable question hanging in the air. Is what you're watching genuinely competitive, or does that competitive integrity now come with an asterisk? None of those questions have easy answers. And none of them go away just because a video got deleted. That's the full story behind one of the strangest, most self-inflicted controversies in recent WNBA history. If you found this breakdown valuable, this is exactly the kind of deep dive content this channel is built around. So if you haven't already, subscribing genuinely helps this channel keep doing this kind of coverage. Drop your take in the comments. Do you think the league should actually suspend Reese and Bueckers, or is this being blown way out of proportion? I'll see you in the next one. WNBA Analysis.